Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another video using Nuvo Shimmer Powders. I had a lot of requests to do more videos using these. I do have a playlist here on YouTube with all my previous videos using these powders, and I will have it linked at the end of this one so you can get more ideas and inspiration and all that. Also, people have asked, like, will this work with XYZ product? Like these powders I have, these mica powders, etc. Honestly, try it out. You never know. Maybe it'll work. I don't really have anything to compare to these, so I can't say how they'll work, but that's the beauty of this hobby. Grab some stamps or even just some watercolor paper and sprinkle on whatever, color powders you have. Spray them with water and see what happens. You never know. You might discover something fun. So I started off with this Flower Frenzy background stamp from Simon's Stamp. This was part of their new Happy and Joyful release that just came out this month. And I am stamping it onto Canson XL watercolor paper. And I'm stamping it onto the textured side, which normally I wouldn't do, but for whatever reason I got smears or something on the flat side of it. And I'm not just going to toss it. So I stamped on the textured side, even though I knew I wouldn't get a perfect or like a really good impression because there's so many solid areas on this stamp. And textured watercolor paper doesn't want to play nice, but I inked it up a couple times with clear embossing ink, stamped it, a couple times with my MISTI, and then I coated it with clear embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool till everything is smooth and melted, always tilting it back and forth in the light, because just like white embossing powder, clear embossing powder on white cardstock or watercolor paper is very hard to see. And then I did it a second time. Off camera, because why not make more than one, especially with techniques like this, because they'll turn out completely different. Even like this, like side by side, they're gonna turn out different. So after they were heat embossed, I taped these down to a hardboard. I have shown in previous videos I won't tape things down, and especially with a technique like this where you're using a lot of water, I highly recommend taping these down. Otherwise they curl right up and then everything starts running off the edges. And in my previous videos I've shown that. So anyway, taped everything down, and then I grabbed my shimmer powders. So I have LUNAR Rocket Shimmer Powder, LILAC Waterfall, and ATLANTIS Burst. And like I always say every time I use these, do not squeeze the bottles. If you have other powders that are similar to this, like there's other powders on the market, like, is it Brusho? Things like that. Same thing. Don't squeeze the bottles. They're very pigmented, and it's amazing how much will come out if you squeeze the bottles. Ask me how I know. So all I do is I hold the bottle and I kind of scrape and tap my index finger on the bottom of the bottle and I get the powder. This looks very boring. Very boring. It's this, what is this? I get it. Very boring. But the excitement is when you start spraying the water and the magic starts happening. So I tap those powders all over the background and then I start spraying it with water, and now you start seeing, what is so neat about these, because they kind of go from looking like nothing to all this color appearing. So since I'm doing this like organic background sort of a thing, and I'm not trying to contain the colors like my previous video when I did the florals, and I was, kind of containing the colors within those flowers with a background. This is also what I highly recommend to just experiment with, either a background stamp or no background at all, like just plain cardstock, plain watercolor paper, and just sprinkle and spray and see what happens. You don't have to keep your powder, in specific areas. So I had sprayed it heavily, it looked like a hot mess, but then look how it dries. I will say with this one specifically, off camera, because I didn't realize I didn't have it filming, I did actually take Q-tips that I wet with water, and I kind of went over some of the embossed flowers to remove the excess color that had kind of beaded up on those solid images. Normally I just don't bother with a lot of the backgrounds I do, but because these had such large solid images, I just, took that wet Q-tip and just quickly swiped over, and removed a bit of the excess so that the actual pattern, was showing through. And then I'd let everything completely dry. And now, after removing the tape, I'm just trimming these down to slightly smaller than what my A2 card bases will be. So I think I trim these down to like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So I'll have a nice kind of border around it with my card base. And then while those were drying, I die cut some Audrey Blue cardstock using this Simply Thank You wafer die. I think this came in one of the recent limited edition kits. I'm not sure. I had ordered it because I saw it in the Simon store and I was like, ooh, I can never have enough thank you sentiments, and especially wafer dies. Word wafer dies especially. It's like I can never have enough of them. I like variety. But anywho, I die cut Audrey Blue cardstock with the words and die cut them multiple times. And then I'm stacking these together with craft tacky glue. And this is the bottle of craft tacky glue that I have a fine metal tip on. I'll have a link to that next to the glue. I just screwed the metal tip right onto the glue, like no special fiddling anything. And then I just keep a pin in it, like one of those little pearl ended sewing pins, a non-rusting one. And I've never had a problem. I have been using the same bottle with this tip on it for, I've lost track of how many months now. And it works great. I keep this one for, my fine detail stuff. And then I have my regular, what I call my regular craft tacky, just as is. And that I go through quite a bit more. But yeah, one for fine detail, one for regular stuff. So I stacked all my layers together with that glue to give it the dimension that I just have to have. And then the outline I had die cut from white cardstock. And then I'll adhere all of this to that outline. And of course I did a second one for the second card. So once I've got those adhered together for my main sentiment, I'm then going to take my card bases, which is again Simon Smooth White cardstock that I cut to 4 1/4 by 11. I scored it at 5 1/2, so these will be top folding A2 cards. And I'm going to stamp the insides of these while I have this background stamp, lined up in my MISTI. And with this, I used some Post-it tape and masked the card base off at the score line so that the stamp doesn't stamp past that. Line that up, and then I'm inking up this stamp with Simon's Fog ink, one of my go-tos for just neutral, simple anything. I love how this ended up looking on the inside of the card, but this would also look really nice on the outside of the card. I kind of wish now that I had stamped the outside of the card with this and then layered, the shimmery watercolor background on top of it, because that would have looked really pretty too. Hindsight as always, so there's another idea. That would also just look really nice, and then add some die. I've got ideas. Ideas are rolling. Anywho. I stamped those the background stamp on the insides, took the background stamp out of my MISTI, put the foam insert back in my MISTI so that I could stamp this little sentiment from the new Missing You stamp set. And that little sentiment stamp I'm stamping onto some doll pink cardstock, and I stamped it with clear embossing ink, and then I'm heat embossing it with white embossing powder. After I did that, I set it aside, put the card bases back in my MISTI, and I lined up another sentiment from that Missing You stamp set. And then once I got that straight, I'm going to ink it up with some dull pink ink, and ended up inking these up twice because they're brand new stamps. So sometimes, the ink doesn't completely coat, because the best way to get a stamp to work, we've got all the different things you can use, an eraser or your hands, different things. But honestly, the easiest way to get a stamp to stamp properly, after it's brand new, is just to keep stamping it. Stamp it, clean it, stamp it, clean it. Works like a charm. Anyway, inked up these stamps a couple times, and then stamped those on the insides of the card bases. And then for the outsides, I put Simon's Big Mama foam tape on the back of all the sentiments. And I've got that roll there. This roll I have used, I don't even know how many card bases I've done with this roll of foam tape. But this is to give you an idea how big it is. You know, these are A2 card fronts basically on top of that roll of foam tape. That's why it's called Big Mama, because the roll itself is enormous. But the foam tape is thin. It's thinner than regular foam tape. It's about a 1/16 of an inch, something like that. So I get my dimension without a bunch of bulk. This is why I love this foam tape. And even for the amount of cards I make, it still takes me a long time to go through a roll of this stuff. So anywho, I had put that foam tape on the back of those panels as well. So everything's got a little bit of dimension. And then I went through my massive stash of bling and I pulled out some Studio Katia Amethyst pearls just to bring in a little more of that purple. So I kind of sprinkled those around the sentiments. And then I'm going to adhere them in place with craft tacky glue, of course, and my little embellishment wand. And normally I'd be done here, but I kept looking at the die cut sentiment and I was like, I just want to add just one more thing, you know, just a little bit more. I got the shimmer and the bling, but why not go a little further? So I pulled out my glitter gloss Aqua shimmer pen. This is the clear one with like the clear silvery sort of glitter. Love, because it is very subtle. Like when it dries, like right now it looks kind of makes the cardstock look darker, but you know, it's subtle until the light hits it and then the sparkle just smacks you in the face. Love it. I ended up doing like a couple coats of that on here because you can never stop. It's just like you can never have enough glitter with this stuff. So I just painted that on and that was it. And everyone always asks, I don't seal these backgrounds. I don't seal stuff I paint with the glitter gloss. Like Tim Holtz says, I don't lick my artwork. You can use a spray sealant, like Krylon makes one. If you want. I've never bothered and I've never had a problem. So just throwing that out there. But anywho, I'm going to turn the flashlight on my phone to try and show like the shimmer and sparkle of these backgrounds. It's so difficult to show in video. You can kind of see it and like you can see the sparkle on the sentiment, which is fabulous, of course. But yeah, they're shimmery and sparkly and the colors just melded together and they're fun. They're so much fun. So like I said though earlier on, use what you've got. If you have different, you know, mica powders, perfect pearls, whatever, experiment. Can't hurt, you know, take a few scraps of cardstock or watercolor paper, etc. Especially if you're going to use a bunch of water, use watercolor paper and play around and see what you get. And then, yeah, I will have more videos coming using the shimmer powders because I'm back on, you know, the kick using them because they're super fun. And I don't know why I stopped using them for so long. But anywho, as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I used. So you can check that out below if you were interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping, commenting, all of it. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.